Welcome back to On the Job, the September jobs report. As we wait for the numbers to hit the tape, let's take a look at some of the other things moving the markets. Disruptions in the global supply chain are causing headaches across the board, and a lot of companies passing those headaches straight to consumers in the form of shortages and higher prices. Joining us with more is Brandon Daniels, president of global markets at Exiger. Brandon, great to have you on this morning. Retailers facing this perfect storm of supply chain delays. What kind of products are we talking here that are being affected?
Well, over the last several months, it's gone from microchips and certain types of resins that are used for plastics to now sort of an explosion of different products that are subject to supply chain constraints. And that's largely because the retail demand has been driven by an enormous spike in goods buying whilst people are at home no longer consuming services. And so the supply chain has already been strained by the pandemic, has been strained by a lack of logistics availability to support core goods. But now, as we start to look at the reverberating effect of pandemic buying, as we look at the reverberating effect of Chinese factories closing due to power outages, petrochemical shortages, workforce and labor shortages, we're sort of seeing this perfect storm that now everything from paper to print books, all the way through to the materials used to create fake Christmas trees are now subject to shortages.
And of course, we're closing in on the holiday shopping season. So what should consumers be expecting here? I've heard some analysts say shop early. Would you agree with that?
So I think there are going to be two things. One, there's going to be a certain volume of products that are just going to be harder to come by. And those are going to be subject to premiums. I've seen a couple of the companies that we work with and that we talk about supply chain issues with talk about premiums or subscription services to guarantee customers access to certain high demand goods. So we're going to see higher prices on goods that are constrained. I think you'll also see people going out to stores and preemptively buying, creating the appearance of potential shortages, and therefore, again, leading to more reverberating, more continuous panic buying. And so what I would suggest to people is that you do plan early, you do focus on, what goods and products you want to have during the holidays, and that you pre-order so that you're not subject to those late stage spikes that are inevitably going to happen in the prices of goods as we get to Christmas.
And just in terms of specifics, so you've got parents who are probably thinking about things like toys and clothing. You've got other people who might be thinking about electronics. Is there one area that you think we're going to really be hard hit when it comes to the supply chain?
So there is a cross section of industries, an overlap of industries in two major areas of the market that cannot be understated. The first is chips. So semiconductors and the chip shortage that's continued to stretch way longer than people forecasted. Those chips are used in cars, they're used in consumer electronics, they're used in fighter planes. They are used in every area of the market. And as we try to do things like increase 5G reach and increase the volume of low Earth orbit satellites that can help people to, process and get bandwidth in remote areas, microchips are going to continue to be a key and core demand that every single sector has. And so be prepared that consumer electronics will be harder hit than other areas. The second, and this is a little bit more pervasive, and thank goodness it's a large scale commodity, but plastics are seeing a degree of shortage. And so plastic goods specifically are going to be at a higher demand, but more specialized plastics really than it is consumer plastics, like medical device companies, specialized plastics that are used in the melt-blown fabrics that we have in N95 masks. Those are the kinds of plastics that are going to be harder to come by, less so the ones that surround an Xbox.
So certainly this has all shed a light on just the supply chain in general and how this all works. With the chips, I think a lot of Americans, including myself, were surprised that so many of the chips are made at just one company in Taiwan, for example. So is this a wake-up call for us here in America? What needs to be done so that we don't find ourselves in this type of position again? And do you think we're actually going to do what needs to be done?
That's the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. I help the U.S. federal government, the companies that support the U.S. federal government and critical infrastructure to reform their supply chains. And this was the ultimate stress test of our supply chains, and we failed. There were major gaps in what we considered to be just-in-time delivery, which is the global logistics process that everyone uses to effectively get that Amazon package to your doorstep. That just-in-time delivery model has failed. People recognize that they need to store and keep larger inventories, that you need more vertical integration in companies. You can't be as specialized as sort of the market had indicated 20 years ago. And so although we've made huge improvements to logistics and supply, the ability to essentially ensure that you have goods into the near forecasted future is going to be a critical need in the future for companies delivering to consumers or delivering to the federal government or delivering, huge turbines to transformers in our electrical grid. The second thing that's really critical to understand is that supply chain visibility is so important. Just like you said, most of us didn't know that there were these big supply chain bottlenecks. That, for instance, the United States has great, fab finishing capabilities on microchips, but doesn't have control of the downstream supply chain in terms of some of the semiconductor work, or more importantly, the raw materials. And that supply chain visibility issue is something we have to address, because the same thing that you were recognizing and every American customer was recognizing, big companies were recognizing at the same time. They didn't have visibility, and they need tools to gain visibility into those sub tiers of their supply, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees removed from them, to see where they've got these big risk issues, right, and that they can diversify them.
All right. Well, great insight. It's really worrisome, and especially, as we mentioned, ahead of the holiday shopping season. But hopefully it is the wake-up call that a lot of these companies and industries needed. A big thank you to Brandon Daniels, president of Global Markets over at Exiger. Appreciate it. Coming up, President.